This episode, we're going to talk about Beach City Drift. I'm Victor Frost, and this is Steven Universe Universe. So, let's get the obvious bit out of the way. I am a big car guy and a big Initial D fan, so this episode obviously resonated with me. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with Initial D, it's an anime about street racing, and there are 3 things from it that are immediately recognizable to anyone who has seen the show. A black and white 1983 Toyota Sprinter Trueno, also known as the AE86 or Hachiroku, which is Japanese for 86, a 1991 Mazda RX-7 Type R, also known as an FD, and Eurobeat music, a type of electronic dance music that was spawned in the 1980s. So when a show has a boxy black and white car racing a low-slung yellow sports car to the sound of electronic dance music, with their powers combined, they create a cultural shortcut to Initial D for anyone who has seen it. And that's the key part. You have to have already seen it. You have to already know what the shortcut is cutting short to. Otherwise, the trick doesn't really work. And really, it's more of an inside joke than a trick. Done well, what happens is what happened in this episode. If you've seen Initial D, the episode is all the more enjoyable to you. If you haven't, well, no loss. But if it's done poorly, you have the Steve Rogers effect, where you end up confused. You know something just happened, but you're missing something. And you don't know what that missing thing is. But, okay, Initial D references, sure, whatever. What about what actually happened in the episode? Well, the main message was that you shouldn't let others dictate your actions. And not in a, oh, you're my boss and you're telling me what to do and, grr, I'm not gonna take it anymore, rage against the machine, down with the man sort of way. Once again, Steven Universe dips its toe into the realm of Taoism. Ancient Chinese philosopher and founder of Taoism Lao Tzu once wrote, "Do you have the patience to wait until your mud settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving until the right action arises by itself?" This is, in short, the idea that rather than reacting to things, you should instead respond. The truth is, we often react without thinking. It's instinctive and knee-jerk, often based on fear and insecurities, and it's not the most rational or appropriate way to act. And there are, of course, people who will intentionally stoke the proverbial fire, especially when they know we will react. Reacting may be founded in passion, but passion should be focused, harnessed, for a purpose, not at the whim of any old unexpected unproductive thing. When you let emotions without reason drive you forward, you lose control. Responding, on the other hand, is taking the situation in and deciding the best course of action based on values that you have, such as reason, compassion, cooperation, etc. There is still that external kick, that inciting incident, but responding is less guided by emotion and more by logic. You're still second in the sequence. They acted and now you're acting in second position. But you decide the trajectory rather than simply taking the first path that initial kick sends you along on. Responding lets you make sure things end up positive and civil, creating opportunities to grow, to listen, to learn. It gives you the chance to act as the person you really are, instead of as the emotion you're feeling at that exact moment. This choice presents itself to us all the time. Whether it's our mother nagging us, our coworkers being rude, our significant others not being kind or considerate enough, and so on. There will always be external events that bother us, but if we learn to respond and not react, we can make things better and not worse. This philosophy of respond, don't react is something that's brought up a lot in the practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness is about focusing your awareness on the present, while calmly acknowledging and accepting your feelings, thoughts, and sensations without judging them. This is because much of our attention in life isn't in the present, but in the past and future. being upset over something that already happened and anxious over something that hasn't. Stephen and Connie spend most of the episode reacting to Kevin. The moment he shows up, they react not just to Kevin in the present, but to Kevin from the past. They react to him in the parking lot, at the starting line, while racing. All the while, they don't stop to think about why they're doing this until they are forced to stop, both physically and mentally, and take a breath. Once they do this, they very quickly realize that they don't have to play his game. Kevin is one of those people that loves making people react. He uses names, insults, sob stories, and flirts to get a rise out of people. He thinks it's funny. It entertains him that he can manipulate people. So when Stephen and Connie decide to respond rather than react, he gets frustrated and begins reacting himself. Mindfulness is a recurring theme in the show, really getting a spotlight in the episode Mindful Education, a play on the term mindful meditation. If you want to learn more about mindfulness, Taoism, and Zen philosophy, I highly recommend you check out sites like zenhabits.net, personaltao.com, and the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert M. Pirsig. While I do meditate from time to time, I am not an expert on Zen, Buddhism, or Taoism. So those sources, among many others, were extremely helpful in my research for this episode. But that is that. Now it's time for us to look at the little crumbs of lore, jokes, and inconsistencies sprinkled throughout the episode. You guessed it, it's time for the bits. Stephen shifts from neutral to first gear. Accelerating with the brake? Here comes a thought. Who was taking the photos? Seriously, who was he comfortable enough around that he could share pasta with a car and not be self-conscious enough to not? I'd hate to see a car without front wheel suspension. Take note here, he drifted over the curb, not the ramp. That would have taken his tires clean off. Presented side by side with no comment. Is that a BlackBerry? In this scene, we see a parallel between Stephen and Connie and Ruby and Sapphire. So I've never had cause to mention this before, but the Pizza Mobile, it's clearly based off of a Volkswagen Thing. No, really, that's the name of the car. Thing. Here's a picture of it I took in a parking lot once. Ronaldo brought a kick scooter to a car race. So what happens if Stevani puts on a pair of shoes, then defuses? Who gets the shoes, and are they still the same size? This bit of dialogue mimics a scene in Initial D. In the beginning, Takumi only knew his car as a Trueno because that's what it said on the badge on the grill. 5-point safety harness, good. Paddle shifters? Okay, so let's go through Stevani's actions during the course of this drift. She dropped it into neutral, which cut power to the rear wheels, pulled the handbrake, which locked up the rear end, slammed on the brakes, which locked up the front wheels because presumably that car has no ABS, and then turned into the corner. That car should have spun out and came to a grinding halt, if not careened off the cliff. You know, something like this. Also, I'm gonna call BS on being able to drift perfectly the first time driving. Kevin downshifts to break traction on the rear wheels to initiate a drift. Rough on the transmission, but at least it's an actual thing. Not sure if it works with shift-by-wire systems, though. The big gauge is RPM, but what the hell is that bottom mini gauge supposed to convey? Well, she countersteered this time. How are they carrying on a casual conversation? Their windows are closed, and even if they weren't, they're racing. There'd be way too much noise. Nice rack focus. Those tread marks make no sense. This line here reveals the sacred and intimate nature of fusion to Stephen and Connie. Just how experienced was that car that it didn't have needles on the gauges? Wait a minute, Kevin should have been long gone. Did he just stop and wait or something? So that's it for this episode. Catch us next time when we talk about restaurant wars. Oh, by the way, did you know I actually shot a completely different version of this episode outside of the studio? I actually decided to try something interesting with it, but I ended up scrapping it after I already filmed everything. So where's all that footage going to go? Well, on my Patreon, of course. I'm going to cut it together right after this video goes up, and only my Patreon supporters will be able to see it. To become one yourself, you can click this link over here. Or you can click here to watch me and my friends play Overwatch while discussing/watching the second presidential debate. While you're deciding which one to click, I'll be on my way. I'm Victor Frost, and I'll see you next time on Steven Universe Universe.